Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going through the full Outlast comics and their lore, a deep dive into every single thing left in Outlast. It goes from the story from before Outlast 1 all the way to the end of Outlast 2 and beyond. So sit back, relax, hit that like button, share, subscribe, let's get straight into this banger. The comic books revolve around Pauline Glick and Paul Marion, aka the Pauls. These two work as Murkoff insurance mitigation officers, covering up Murkoff operations to avoid massive payouts. Issue 1. It starts off with a man walking into an FBI office. He is holding his face with blood going everywhere. When he sees that his eye is hanging out of his socket, the security guard yells to put his hands up. But in doing so, Paul's eye falls completely out of its socket. Waking up in a hospital bed with his eye patched, a detective sits at the end of the bed to ask him questions about the 14 murders, but Paul says there's no evidence. Meanwhile, at Murkoff, Pauline is sitting down with two other men, discussing where to find Paul since he's a liability. They talk about back in 2008 when Pauline and Paul were working on a case on the Hatbox murders. Flashback to 2008 when they found the third body of a man called Martin Belmont. They spent 3 days reconstructing him, but couldn't find his head. Just like the other two victims, he was a patient at the Spindletop Psychotherapy Clinic in Hatton, Texas, which helped war veterans cope with PTSD. Pauline sits with a psychotherapist to give the speech, saying, "We are not here to save anyone. Saving these patients raises Murkoff's insurance premiums, which is an unnecessary expense that makes us sad." The Pauls asked for the deceased patient's therapy session notes, which are under doctor-patient confidentiality. They distract the doctor by asking about the Sumerian statues. He says they help the patients see that it's not all about war out there, giving them hope, and he believes the statues demonstrate Christian and Islamic myths originating from the exact same space. The patients undergo dream therapy guided by hypnosis, so they can re-experience and release traumatic events subconsciously without burdening the waking mind. It was remarkably effective, with rates of abuse, self-harm and suicidal thoughts all but eliminated. The Pauls, knowing this, move on to another source, a man called Strong Fat, who runs surveillance. They run every session without the doctor's knowledge. Strong Fat shows the Martin Belmont video, then the Priscilla Clark and John Bowers videos, the other two victims. After watching, he shows his sessions where he saves the doctor from another patient called Omar. He makes copies of the footage and hands them to the Pauls. They proceed to leave for dinner, but when they come back, they find Dr. Claymore's body without a head. They go to check the security footage, only to find the security room torn up with the monitors smashed beyond repair. They come to the realization that Dr. Claymore and Strong Fat had access to the footage. Arriving at Strong Fat's house, they find it completely empty, but luckily, a woman has a spare key. When they enter, they find boxes with heads inside, 3 of them. Knowing he's on the way, they call for backup. They see a pink stuffed pig on the bed. As he enters, his name is Chris Walker, aka Fat Piggy Pig, the man from the original Outlast game. Seeing Paul hold the pig, Chris goes ballistic, throwing Pauline across the room, grabbing Paul by the throat. Pauline flies through the air, shoots Chris straight through the face. He screams, "Little pig," as he runs in front of Pauline's car. Pauline knocking him out with the car. They call Murkoff to cover up what happened. Flash forward to Paul in the hospital. He said he put all 4 heads into Abdul's apartment to set him up. The reason they set him up wasn't just for the money, but for his daughter, who has a rare incurable blood disease. Murkoff has treatment to cure it, and that's why Paul does his job to keep her alive. W Dad. Abdul gets life in prison, but Chris Piggy Walker wasn't so lucky. He has been sent to Mount Massive Asylum. As the Pauls walk into the asylum, that ends Issue 1. Issue 2. They need to operate on Paul's eye, or he will go completely blind and lose some brain function. But he wants to wait until he finishes his story. The Pauls investigate an anonymous email from someone at Mount Massive Asylum claiming negligence. They go to the Mount Massive Asylum to check out the story, to find out who sent it. But it's hidden perfectly. A SWAT team sends the Pauls to the underground lab 102 feet beneath the asylum. Pauline sees Chris Walker butt naked in a chamber. but Jeremy Blair, the vice president, is there to greet her. She remarks that Chris is no longer human, and Blair remarks, "I wouldn't say he was ever a human." We see Billy hooked up to a machine. Pauline goes to check on Paul and give him the rundown of what's happening. They go to check the IT, but the IT lady is a pregnant ranger. They ask about her email that was bounced around some onion routers. She says the guy has to be in corporate. The guy they suspect is Richard Trager, whom they investigate. He's a smug looking man with a pink shirt who tries to flirt with Pauline, but it doesn't work. He talks about a lot of nothing, but he says his job is to minimize the expense of security. The Pauls look puzzled. Paul writes on his notepad, "This guy's dirty as hobo shit." Another pregnant woman walks through with coffee. Pauline asks Trager to show her around, which he says, "Is that a date?" So Pauline and Trager go on a date. After the date, he asks Pauline to come back to his place. He offers some cocaine, but she refuses, instead asking for some wine from the wine cellar down below. While he's gone, she snoops through the apartment, finding passwords, cocaine, nudie magazines, and an abortion pamphlet. As he brings the wine, she asks if he's single. He says no. 30 minutes go by, and she realizes he spiked her drink. She whips out her gun, points it right at his dangalang, and says, "Drink this, I'm gonna pop your dangalang of balls straight off." She calls Paul to pick her up, taking the abortion pamphlet to see the pregnant lady while Trager is knocked out on the couch. The lady says the baby is Trager's, but she must have an abortion or he will get her fired due to an NDA. Eventually, she breaks it and gets fired. Her assistant, Waylon Park, takes over her job. But they need to reach human resources. In comes Trager with a full head of steam. Knowing his career is over, he picks up a pair of scissors and starts stabbing at her pregnant stomach. The Pauls grab him, throw him into a shredder where his hair gets caught, pulling at the top of his skull, making him disfigured. They get her to a hospital, but they find out she was never pregnant. It was a psychosomatic pregnancy. They come to find 1 in 3 women at Mount Massive Asylum experience phantom pregnancies because of the experiments going down in the basement. Since every woman there could sue for millions, they had to shut it down until they say the password, which Paul has to leave due to not having a high enough clearance. Jeremy shows Pauline the profits, which shock her by the number. They remove every woman from the asylum to a different location to stop the phantom pregnancies. Pauline, before she left, asked to witness Trager's punishment. They wheel Trager into a hyperbolic time chamber, butt naked, which ends issue 2. Issue 3. Paul visits his daughter between jobs and brings her dolls, but all she wants is to see her father more. Paul visibly upset. After the leak, we see Chris ripping someone's head clean off, Eddie Gluskin sawing someone's dangalang off, and a man in another corpse's guts deep diving in there. Something was created that day. It was the Walrider. As the Pauls investigate the aftermath of the asylum from Outlast 1, they see Jeremy Blair's corpse, or lack thereof. Jokingly, they say he's lost weight, wondering who could have done this to him. They notice all the files have been wiped clean, no evidence, no nothing, which helps them. Waylon Park has escaped and made contact with Simon Peacock. They have made Simon the main priority, but for now, Miles has been neutralized due to the events of Outlast 1. A few days later, Billy Hope's mother, Tiffany, is in a caravan park only 8 miles from the hospital. She opens her door to see her son Billy standing there, and they exchange a hug. The Pauls find Miles' Jeep that Waylon had driven earlier to escape, as he could be anywhere. Check Miles' bank accounts and see it has been used from a cell tower outside of Nathrop, Colorado. But Miles has had serious connections there. They notice that Billy was born with his mum Tiffany, who still lives there. Tiffany doesn't know about Miles and hasn't heard from Billy since the day that he left Mount Massive Asylum because she wasn't allowed to visit him. However, she seems very cheerful, as if Billy, her son, is deceased. They noticed a man's hat. Her ex's hat? She plays dumb about Miles. Upshur, what a funny name. Obviously lying. They look at Billy's Halloween picture. Paul notices the hero costume from a book that his daughter reads. They see some very expensive crystal figures and asks how do you afford them? But she gets mad and ushers them to leave. As they leave, two figures resembling Miles and Chris Piggy Walker appear on top of her home. Paul looks back and the figures disappeared. Knowing that she was full of crap, they want to keep a keen eye on her, with an officer staying outside due to the Pauls having bigger fish to fry. In the meantime, to find Waylon, they perform a forensic gaslight, where they steal his identity, post crazy stuff underneath his name, like conspiracy theories, perversions, and delusions. The note is horrendously misspelled. They get a call from the officer at Tiffany's home, who says Tiffany's boyfriend is here, and says it's sexy time, while taking pictures. That absolute weirdo. The man starts abusing Tiffany, calling her horrid names. Then he strikes her in the face, but Billy sees it happen. As the man walks to his car, as he gets in, he sees Billy on the passenger seat, who proceeds to absolutely horrendously murder the man in a horrific sight. The security guards check out the crashed car, but as he approaches, the Walrider kills him by coming straight into his eyes. Billy goes to see his mother, but he scares her to her knees, saying, "I'll take care of you, Mum." Outside, the whole Murkoff SWAT team turns up. They have this one chance to kill the Walrider for good. The Pauls go inside looking for Billy, but his mum is visibly scared because she's the only one who can summon Billy. They notice the figurines have been shattered. Paul reminisces about his daughter in a flashback. The Pauls continue to convince her to summon Billy. Still, they ask how she got the money for the figurines, implying that Murkoff gave her the money for Billy, who wasn't sick, but she just gave him up for some figurines. Billy emerges, angry, saying, "I loved you, Mum," then proceeds to kill her. The Pauls run out to the SWAT team, who unleash a gas, ammo, everything they got in their arsenal, which kills Billy / the Walrider, as they thought. During cleanup, Paul climbs to realize Billy isn't dead, showing millions of ants, where the Walrider now lives, to end issue 3. Issue 4. The Pauls visit Wayland Park, the whistleblower's house. He brought down Murkoff as a whole, but the house is burnt down. As he fled with his family, all they could find was a family photo. Then the Pauls joke about hurting the families, which is in bad taste. Flash forward to Paul in the hospital. "We flew east to Miles' apartment. Even though Miles died at Mount Massive, we're hoping for a lead," Paul says, reflecting on their journey. Flashback. The Pauls talk to an old woman who claims to saw Miles jogging around last night. But that's impossible. Despite the doubts, she insists the dogs went off as if they saw him. They enter the apartment, which is filled with garbage and infested by ants. Someone had used Miles' account from Tiffany's trailer, sending swarms of ants. The ants start biting the Pauls, swarming them, forcing them to flee the bathroom and turn on the water, but it offers no relief. Desperate, they build a flamethrower from a can they have found. They strip down into their tighty-whities and burn the ants off, fleeing to the car. Along the way, they notice the same homeless man walking past, who they saw in Colorado. Paul chases him down the street, but his heavy, robust build leaves him out of breath. Just as he's about to give up, the man approaches and introduces himself as Simon Peacock. Simon reveals that he has been watching Paul from a distance, noticing Paul isn't like the other Murkoff employees. He has shame. Simon jokes about Paul being naked and chasing him. Paul recognizes Simon, who claims to have been trying to destroy Murkoff for over 6 years. He insists Murkoff are the devils, and that he's protecting Waylon, claiming no one will ever find him. Simon asks about the Walrider project, but Paul can't answer, blaming willful ignorance. Simon reflects on Mount Massive Asylum. Simon reflects on how Mount Massive Asylum is just a pebble in a pond, and the true sickness lies in the experiments. Simon needs Paul's help, though insists he's not asking. He's telling him. Suddenly, Simon shoves a pink foam brick into Paul's mouth, forcing him to bite down. Pauline arrives just in time, aiming a gun at Paul, who flees. She fires, but the bullets pass through, harmlessly, through him. Simon leaps in the air, knocking Paul down with a punch, and escapes. Paul figures out why Simon made him bite the foam, to obtain dental records for identification. But Simon and Wayland's locations will soon be uncovered due to the evidence left at Miles' home. The fumigation of Miles' apartment came too late. The ants have consumed everything. Because of this, Mount Massive Asylum is behind them for now. Using the coordinates that Simon gave Paul, they have a lead to another Murkoff operation in the area. However, Pauline decides there's no point in pursuing it further. She insists Paul take time off to be with his sick daughter, claiming the case is over. We see a pregnant woman and a man walk towards a cross to end Issue 4. Issue 5. The couple is in Arizona, running away from someone hunting them, reassuring her that not even the God will be able to find them. At the Glick residence, they talk about Yeshua from the Bible, but he asks her when her homework is due since she hasn't eaten yet. He looks out the window to see a man in a black coat raiding their mailbox. Running out, the man flees, but there is a piece of paper with coordinates, and the message says, "Your daughter is connected." Back at the hospital, the Pauls have to investigate the coordinates. In Arizona, Paul calls Pauline from the airport. While at the Glick residence, Pauline is recording some intimate moments with two women. Paul lies, but Pauline is none the wiser. Paul rents a huge SUV to go to the coordinates that Simon has left him. But the SUV breaks down, leaving Paul to trek 23 miles on foot in the hot desert sun with zero phone service. He develops heat stroke and starts hallucinating, going 23 years back to see his daughter getting a hot chocolate, while his wife is dying all over again, replaying all the events from her going into a coma due to internal bleeding, which led to her death. Spilling the hot chocolate on his daughter, he says sorry, waking up in the desert to the present time. As he wakes, a man has a gun pointed at Paul, threatening him not to use Jesus' name in vain or else. The man shoots, but luckily the safety is still on. The woman pulls out a knife and stabs Paul straight through the arm. Using the same arm, Paul cuts the man's jugular, killing him. Paul tries to comfort the pregnant lady, but she flees. In a flashback, he tells the detective that he followed her trail for miles. As he walks, he sees his dead wife Joanne once again asking him, is that all you've got for me? By the time he catches up to the woman, she has hitchhiked in a truck and gotten away. He manages to write down the license number. As his phone gets signal, Paul calls Pauline, telling her he's in big trouble. Paul feels remorseful. The next morning, Paul is picked up by a family and got taken to a hospital. Pauline meets him there 6 hours later. She listened to everything, visibly angry, telling him he shouldn't have done this without her. And their partners, she gives them the license plate number. Paul receives a brand new suit with a yellow tie. Wonder if he killed the boy, with Pauline confirming that the woman was real. At the hospital, the woman, now unconscious, is found to be Jane Doe. She has a healthy baby boy, but due to her unconscious state, with the abnormalities on the scan, her condition is precocious. Back in issue 2, Pauline remarks that Jane Doe's brain matches the common scarring from the morphogenic engine exposure, similar to the patients at Mount Massive. Back to issue 5, asking for the scans, they are sent off, but knowing it's risky, the Pauls decide to meet Jane Doe. They wait for hours in the room, noticing a tattoo on the chest of a globe with a wheel, referring to the book of Ezekiel. She suddenly wakes, terrified that Ezekiel will kill her and take her baby. She has a seizure from the pure shock. Alone in the room, Pauline claims she died of natural causes. Leaving the hospital, She wonders what trap Simon has set in the desert to find. Paul, driving, remarks that his daughter's transfusion is the next day, and Pauline finally being nice and says, "You're a good dad." Flashback to Jane dead in the hospital bed with her neck snapped. Paul goes home to find his daughter kidnapped, with the blood writing on the wall saying, "You work for us now." And one of her fingers lying on the floor, Pauline cleans up Paul's mess from the desert and sets up a grid search for 40 miles. But they find nothing. No trace of the boy's body, like nothing ever existed. Flash forward to a tall woman with a pickaxe dragging a boy's body through the desert. This is where Outlast 2 begins and issue 5 comes to an end. The final chapter, the epilogue. A fat, balding man is giving a woman a drink. It looks like a poison, saying, "God doesn't do half measures." As he walks away, he leaves the woman bleeding out of her mouth. While walking, there are bodies littered throughout. He enters the church and they're panned to a tower with the same ants from Billy's mother's house swarming the tower. A huge gust of wind blows over the tower, exploding on the ground. 7 hours later, Pauline arrives asking where Paul is, but he won't answer the phone because he's been fed information from an outside source about a connection between Mount Massive and Temple Gate. They notice hundreds of bodies poisoned by cyanide. As they see Ezekiel, aka Papa North, Pauline mutters, "God damn, this guy's heavy," as 7 men have to drag his fat carcass out of the church. They spot a woman lying dead in the church. They realise it's Lynn Langerman from Outlast 2. They know it's her because she was at the hospital earlier when they were interviewing the Temple Gate woman, Jane Doe. Paul was meant to ensure Blake and Lynn didn't come here in the first place. They did find one person still alive, Blake, Lynn's husband. He's in a complete catatonic state. They take him to the psych clinic to dig deep into his head a little bit. They enter Paul's house to find him and his daughter missing, with the blood running from issue 5. But make sure he's a corpse because he's very dangerous. Meanwhile, they go back to the past, where Paul Marion is tied to a chair in front of Simon Peacock. Peacock wants the Walrider. Marion tells Peacock that Upshur is dead, so is Billy Hope, and they found nothing at Temple Gate. Simon states that Murkoff made the Walrider, but it was just a rough draft. They stumbled across it with Billy and Miles. The Walrider is a masterpiece. Peacock says the morphogenic engine needs a delivery mechanism at Mount Massive, but they did this with conditioning videos that were more customizable. But Peacock suggests religion as a viable option. It ends with Peacock giving a sign, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, with the 3 antagonists from the 3 games. Murkoff Wernicke, the fossil from the wheelchair, the Walrider, and Ezekiel, the absolute pig, fat dog himself. Amen. As the comics come to an end. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure to hit that like button, share, subscribe, tell me anything in the comment section down below. Type GOAT if you made this far in the video. We got one more Outlast video to go, which is the Outlast Trials comics, and then we'll put them all into one big video. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.